The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
How many of you know that there is a sacredness to feasting, right? Like the best example I can give is Thanksgiving, right? How many of you would have a Thanksgiving routine? What's your ritual? Like, do you go to different houses? Do you eat all at once? Do you eat in the afternoon and the evening? Whatever it is, there's a sacredness and something special when it comes to feasting. So when David puts this in the passage, that God prepares a table before us, that it's in reference to feasting, and not just any kind of feasting, but the kind of feasting that the Jewish people would have in this period of time. And so what David is doing is lifting our eyes back up to the grandeur of God, like he did in verse 3, like he's trying to remind us in verse 4 and now in verse 5. He is talking about God yet again being an initiating God. That God is moving towards us as we've come out of the valley of the shadow of death. And as we come out of that, God meets us not with a loaf of bread to steady us on our journey, which would in and of itself be good news. But no, he welcomes us with a feast that he's prepared. And that feast is not in private. Now that's good news. Despite your struggles, despite your difficulties, despite whatever happened in the dark night of the soul, in the valley of the shadow of death, no matter what happened there, God is not throwing a party for you, tucked away in some far off place where no one knows that he treasures you and that he loves you. He delights in you, and he makes everyone aware of it. The text says that he prepares a feast in front of your enemies, that your enemies are aware of God's pleasure over you, his love for you, his gladness over you. In fact, he wants to make sure. He even puts an exclamation point on this idea in the next phrase in the passage, where he says that he anoints our head with oil. So this is just extending this thought. And so in this period of time, men and women who are in mourning, we're coming out of the valley of the shadow of death, right? So people in that type of season would usually have sackcloth and ashes on. And maybe as they were coming out of that season, as a symbol of I'm trying to move towards gladness, or I'm trying to move towards joy, they might anoint themselves with oil. So they're in a sad, dark season. They come out sackcloth and ashes and try to get them out. They may anoint themselves with oil. But when someone else anointed you with oil, it was to show that you were a guest of honor, that you had a special relationship. Now, get your mind around this, because this is a bit of a confrontational passage, especially if you think that God is just tolerating you, or if you kind of exhaust God, or if he's just disappointed at you. And this is what goes in your mind when you think about the grandeur and greatness of God. What is happening here in this psalm is that you've showed up and he's run towards you, and he's pouring oil to show everyone, enemies and friends alike, that at the table of the Lord you are his beloved. He throws a chalice into your hand and starts pouring into your cup out of his infinite fullness, and he pours and pours and pours until your cup overflows. This is a beautiful picture of God's love, pursuit, rejoicing, delighting, celebrating gladness in those who are in his flock. And I think it is especially beautifully placed coming after this idea that you and I endure difficult seasons, that you and I are not immune to those seasons, that you and I are going to have times where we feel like God has abandoned us, that God has forgotten about us, where we're looking around and saying, are you here, God? Are you with me, God? And we are going to find him in those places as the great comforter, with his rod and his staff, being there to guide us and to protect us and to comfort us. And then that season is going to give way into a season of feasting. Think about this. And I don't want you to think that this is once I die, I'll go to heaven. Yes, there will be a feast. I believe all of that happens. But don't mistake that that's what it's talking about, because the reality is that the righteousness that has been imputed to you is that it's actually happening right now. That God rejoices over you right now. That God, even in this moment, regardless of the season of your life, regardless of where you are right now, regardless of the struggle, that it is true about you right now. Listen, he delights in you, and he wants to bless you, and he wants to give and graciously extend out of his riches and into your poverty. The beauty of what it means to belong to the household of faith is that. And so I wonder, are you in a spot where you can really believe that Christ's righteousness imputed to you, that path of righteousness that has been given to you for the name and sake of God, could move God's heart towards you in this way? Because if you don't get this, this is important. If you don't get this, what happens is you spend all the days of your life trying to earn this kind of love, trying to earn this kind of acceptance, and it would be ashamed if you grew weary trying to earn something that God is freely given. And so let us walk in what is already given to us by our good shepherd. Let us walk out of the season of the valley of the shadow of death, understanding that the feast is before us. He has anointed our head. He is not ashamed of his flock. Let us walk and follow the voice of the shepherd.